I've been waiting to review Blackbird because I want to make absolutely sure I give it enough time and do the game justice. I'm going to start things off in a slightly unusual way by giving a score straight off the bat. And the only score I could possibly give Blackbird is a perfect 10. That might seem extreme to some, but Blackbird was my personal game of the year 2018, and while it might not have been many others, how can I score it any other way? Now, I'm calling this a review, but really it's going to be more of an attempt at an explanation of why I think this game is so good, and hopefully I'll be able to convince some of you too. So since we've started this review in a slightly non-traditional way, let's continue in that vein by talking about the biggest fault in a game I've just told you I rate as 10 out of 10. Blackbird is too short. Shmups, I know, are almost always short. One of my biggest pet peeves is seeing a major publication or YouTuber review a shmup, harp on for 10 minutes about how fun and engaging it was, then promptly knock a couple of points off its score because it was only, and yes, I'm doing that annoying inverted commas with your fingers thing, only 40 minutes long. However, no matter how you look at it, Blackbird is too short. There are just 4 stages, and a complete run through of the game can take as little as 12 to 15 minutes. Now, I don't think it needs 7+ stages. In fact, having 7 stages may well ruin it. But I do think just one more would have made it feel more complete without overextending its welcome. However, even with its mere 4 stages, Blackbird manages to pack so much intrigue and depth into those 15 minutes that it'll leave a deeper impression on you than many story and character driven games would be able to in 15+ hours. Blackbird's excellence encompasses virtually every aspect of the game. It begins with its mechanics and scoring systems, and extends to its visuals, music, and even story. Yes, I know it's a shmup, and yes, I did just say story. Now, since it is such an unusual thing to rave about in a shmup review, let's look at Blackbird's story. In a much discussed opening cutscene, a young girl, seemingly both orphaned and living in poverty, collapses on the street of an old town. Wealthy looking passers-by ignore her prone figure until one gentleman stops, prods her with the end of his cane, then also shuffles off. The girl, heavily insinuated to now be dead, then turns into an egg from which hatches the titular Blackbird, who, under the player's control, immediately sets about visiting death and destruction on the town and its inhabitants. Further cutscenes elaborate on the girl's backstory, none of them lasting more than a few brief seconds, and all free of even a single word of speech or narration. What's most impressive about these scenes is how much interest Blackbird manages to inspire in its players with these fragmentary interludes. I read a review of almost comically epic proportions in which the author expounded in detail his ideas on how the story is a comment on real-world income inequality and class struggle. I watched another reviewer, however hyperbolically he may have meant it, claim the first scene had moved him to tears and filled him with rage. Note please that we are talking about silent cutscenes that if run back to back would barely extend to more than a minute. Giving them extra intrigue is the way you come across them. Initially the game is only available on one difficulty and the cutscenes are always the same. Completing this difficulty, however, unlocks a harder one, and completing stages in this mode will result in different scenes playing depending on in-game performance, imparting them with a very real sense of mystery. Having seen many of these scenes so many times before, being greeted with a new one becomes a moment of great excitement as you try to connect it to all the others you've previously viewed. And the story is not only told through its cutscenes, there's also a certain amount of visual storytelling going on in the 4 stages. The first is set in the quaint Victorian novel-style town in which she died, but the others become increasingly technologically advanced, with stage 4 reminiscent of a dystopian sci-fi. What does this progression mean? Who are these other inhabitants? I'll leave that to you to decide, but they certainly add a further element of intrigue to the story. As to the bosses, there are only 4, but each is absolutely unique in both their design and range of attack patterns. All, of course, are out to kill you, but what is their connection to the towns and townspeople you've just devastated? Again, I'll leave you to speculate, but again, they provide yet another layer of intrigue. And speaking of the bosses, a mechanical chicken, a hot air balloon face, a laser-wielding mouse inside a giant wheel of destruction, a Santa Claus lookalike. I have no clue where these ideas came from, but I have no doubt you'll never have come across anything quite like them before. There are no simple tanks or trains on offer here, but incredibly, given their complete individuality, all of the bosses do somehow manage to remain consistent with the game's immediately identifiable style. Perhaps that is because the game's style could only be defined as quirky and borderline bizarre, but either way the consistency of tone maintained throughout the game is remarkable when also paired with its continual visual invention. The 4 towns you wreak havoc upon are all visually distinct, and yet despite running the gamut from rustic provincial town to sci-fi skid city in the sky, they all feel part of the same world. Colour is used brilliantly in the backgrounds here, with the sepia tones of the old city giving way to the sickly green of a fluorescent pleasure town and the cold blue and steel sterility of the futuristic scientists' enclave. The detail in these worlds is also staggering. While at first glance they may appear simple, the more you look, the more you see. Weather vanes and windmills spin and can be shot, inorganic trash flows through translucent tubes, lights rise on a neon rocket ship that looks like it's been thrown out the back door of a Vegas casino. And through it all the inhabitants run, some scared and fleeing for their lives, some ready and flying through the sky, some hidden behind destructible parts of the scenery, concocting plans or preparing further traps to ensnare the black bird. Many areas also hide secrets. What look like lettuces growing from the ground turn out to be rockets. What looks like some debris in some long grass turns out to be 2 citizens trying to hide a pot containing a power-up from the black bird. And with that mention of a power-up, let's finally turn to the mechanics of the game itself. The cities can be traversed horizontally in either direction and wrap around in a kind of fancy zone or resogun kind of way. Amongst the hordes of enemies, a half-dozen guard towers have been erected, and these are marked on a simple map at the bottom of the screen. The aim of each stage is to destroy all the towers, at which point an alarm will sound signalling the arrival of the stage boss. Now these towers can actually be taken out remarkably quickly. However, not just the game's scoring system, but its levelling up mechanics are going to lead you to want to spend a lot more time than necessary before doing so. See, when it comes to mechanics, I think the real genius of this game is how intrinsically scoring, levelling and progression are all tied to one another. Before we look at those in detail though, let's quickly examine your basic actions. The Blackbird can move in any direction, but can face only either left or right, although in some boss stages it will be fixed to face right. Instead of lives you have a health bar, and when that drops to 0 the game is over, no continues. You have a single shot which can auto-fire and some bombs. Both your shot and your bombs can be leveled up, and how you do that is one of the game's smartest systems. Killing enemies causes them to drop green gems. These both give you points and add to a green gauge which encircles your character. When the circle completes, you power up. Taking hits can reduce this, but essentially these power-ups can be thought of as permanent. In other words, the longer you play, the more powerful you will get. The gems dropped come in various sizes depending on the enemy killed and need to be collected as quickly as possible. This is not just because, like in many games, they will eventually disappear, but because they bounce after dropping and every time they touch the ground they reduce in size. Now killing enemies, especially tougher ones, is the first and foremost way to generate gems, but it's not the only way. Killing enemies starts a chain, which provides score bonuses, and when the chain maxes out at 30, releasing a bomb gives huge point and gem bonuses. This ties back to our first mechanic brilliantly, since while of course you do want to be scooping up any and all gems quickly, you don't want to be breaking your chain at 20 something because you were too busy scooping up a couple of small gems. You also have the towers to take into consideration. These take far more hits to take out, and a bomb is the best way to get them down quickly. This also gives you an even bigger bonus. But every stage has half a dozen towers, and you start with just 3 bombs. So when is best to drop a bomb? Well, the first stage structures are weaker, but remember you're increasing in power all the time. Oh, and did I mention the speed with which you complete levels contributes to your end of stage multiplier? With some judicious use of bombs, the first stage can be completed in double quick time for a very healthy bonus. But then how many gems will you get doing that? And did you notice I said speed contributes to your multiplier? Well, the other half is how many enemies you kill. But how do you kill more enemies and go fast? Well, you'd better use bombs. But don't you need bombs later? Well, yeah, but use them quickly, get more gems, and you'll get more powerful. But if you use bombs powering up, You won't have any to use once they're at that super powerful level. True, but are you playing for points or survival? Well, what's that? You don't know because all the systems are so elegantly linked you can't do one without thinking about the other? Well, god damn it, how many things can one player consider at once before they hatch into a blackbird themselves? And actually, didn't we start this whole section by mentioning the pots the townspeople are hiding? Inside these we have yet another mechanic, bonus items. Well, at least that's simple, right? All gamers love bonus items. But in Blackbird these provide just another layer to the game. See, there are 3 types: extra health, extra bomb, or speed up. Whatever pops out first can be shot to change it into one of the other 2. But choose carefully. There are a finite number of these and they're both carefully hidden and often take time to dig out. So do you take the time making sure you get the one you want? What if you're in danger of losing your chain and the enemies are all in the opposite direction? Do you go for health or a bomb? Remember, you need those bombs too. Well, let's not get into bombs again. Suffice it to say, finding and selecting bonus items is another choice fraught with major and minor pros and cons to consider. And yeah, by the way, remember this is a shmup, so you've got enemies firing at you constantly. Honestly, I feel like there's still so much I'm missing out here. So many tactical considerations and ways the systems intermingle. But I'll leave it to you, if you ever play this, and you really must, to experience them for yourself. Now, in my reviews I don't tend to dwell too much on music, since I always think that's something that comes down almost entirely to personal preference. But for Blackbird I'll make an exception. It's not that I really love the music. I certainly can't imagine pumping it from the stereo with the windows down and the volume up as I cruise the city streets. But whether you like it or not, there can be no denying it's a spectacularly original piece of work, and I personally think it adds immensely to the character and atmosphere of the game as it spins and weaves its weird charm in and out of time with the action on screen. Mad voices chant words in a nonsense language, and stylistically it's almost impossible to define. Try to imagine what a Gregorian-era Russian circus orchestra might sound like if Japanese musician Susumu Hirasawa somehow travelled back in time to conduct them in a warped rendition of the Windmill song from Ocarina of Time. No? Well, I can't do better than that, sorry. Let's just have a listen. You try describing that. So all in all, in Blackbird we have an original shmup that is wonderfully, curiously unique in every aspect of its presentation. A game and set of mechanics that are solid and fun, and a scoring system that is one of the deepest, most rewarding, challenging and hard to pin down I've ever experienced. As stated at the start of this review, Blackbird was my personal Game of the Year 2018, and with it just passing its first birthday, I'd implore anyone with an interest in either shmups or quirky offbeat titles to give this game a try. As ever, do let me know what you thought if you played this. Have you also been shouting its greatness from the rooftops, or do you think I'm utterly insane for thinking a game that can be finished in about 12 minutes could possibly be a Game of the Year? Either way, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Cheers.